One thing that didn't sit well with me at first were these return statements. Here we're returning what looks like the HTML markup for a div, but not inside a string or any type that JavaScript supports. So the question is, how does this work? If you remember the JSX lesson, we added a JSX type to our script tag. What happens if we take that off? This is what you might have expected. We now have an error as soon as it hits that JSX tag. Before we move on, let's put that back. At the top of our file, we included the JSX transformer script. It takes our JSX tags and transforms them to plain old JavaScript functions. So our h1 tag gets converted to create element function calls. To illustrate this, let's look at the JSX compiler service. Here, I'll paste in our greeting component. As you can see, the JSX compiler is taking our h1 tag and turning it into a create element function call. In the first couple lessons, I told you that create element takes 3 arguments: a tag name, attribute options, and the text we want to render. That's mostly true, but the third argument can also be a component, and in fact, can be any number of additional arguments. Here we'll add a strong tag around the word React and see how that changes things in the JavaScript output. Now our h1 create element function gets 4 arguments: the tag type, no attribute options, the string hello, and a create element function for our strong component. That's a lot to process. So what's the big picture? JSX tags are just nice syntax around the create element function. Under the hood, render simply contains more nested render functions for the components nested inside of it. JSX makes it easy to mark up your render methods in a way that feels familiar and looks like HTML. So will you ever need to call create element directly? I doubt it, but it's important to get an idea of what JSX is doing for you. JSX tags simply map one-to-one to create element functions. I hope you now have a better idea of why we're able to return JSX tags in our render functions. In the next lesson, we'll talk about how to pass data into components with props.